Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for watching. We are getting off to somewhat of a sensitive start this morning, touching on a topic that isn't easy to acknowledge this time of year. After all, the holidays are supposed to be a happy, joyful, peaceful time. But for anyone who has lost a loved one, the holidays can become a painful reminder of everyone who is missing. Steve Andrus knows that pain. He lost his son Tyson to suicide. Because it happened around the holidays, this time of year has become a memory marker, casting a shadow on what should be a time of joy, peace, and celebration. Here is his story.
My name's Steve Andrus, and I have a first-hand experience with grief in the holidays. My son died 6 years ago this year, and his death was on the night before Thanksgiving. When I found him, I realized it was way too late for any CPR or anything of that nature, and so I actually was able to lay him on the floor, and I laid down with him for probably 15 minutes before I ever even called 911. For me, that has actually been one of the strongest things that's kept me going, is being able to, for me, spend that final moment alone with my son. He was a very, very affectionate kid. Ever since birth, he was just so affectionate, and he felt everything so deeply. He was always reaching out. He was reaching out to other people. He was reaching out to people that didn't quite fit in. I think the thing that hurts the most during the holiday season is just that it is that time where people get together as family, and you always know that that one person is not going to be there. I can't feel him anymore. I can't touch him. I can't hear him. And that is so devastating as a father to think, where's my son? So when the grief comes up and the hurt comes up, I do try and pay attention to it, not just try and push it away. I'll write letters to him. I'll write letters as if he's writing back to me. I'll go to the cemetery and spend time there. I love it when people talk about Tyson. I mean, here's when he was born, and then this is my Grateful Dead t-shirt. The more I can express myself and talk about him, it helps me. On Thanksgiving, I'll never forget it, but I actually heard his laughter. I could hear it. It was palatable. I could hear it, I could feel it, I could see it, and I thought, how amazing. You know, he is present. He is in my heart.
Despite the pain, Steve says there are gifts in the grief. He believes he's a more empathetic person because of his loss. He's actually finishing up his master's degree in counseling so he can help others who may be struggling. Now, no matter what the circumstances, losing someone you love is painful, and the holidays often make things harder. Studio 5 relationship coach Dr. Matt Townsend joins me with advice on how to handle grief when everyone around you is celebrating the holiday season. And I think it applies to people like Steve who lost a loved one around the holidays, but really the holidays, if you've lost anyone at any time, it brings out that pain.
Now, why? This seems so weird. Is it it must be the presents.
The presents?
The tinsel. What is it?
The sparkly. You know, it's that overload of emotion, I think. You know, we're experiencing so much emotion in such a short period of time that it draws your attention to what's not there.
It's the spirit. It's the spirit of the season is where, notice, I loved, did you notice he said the thing that he brings out the Grateful Dead t-shirt? The irony of that is Steve is grateful, not about the death, but he's finding gratitude. He's finding something else to turn the emotion. So the emotion, remember, we've talked about this on the show a million times. The emotion's there to tell us something.
Right.
And he says he pays attention. When he starts to have these feelings, he focuses in and pays more attention.
Which a lot of people avoid, I have to say. Those feelings set in and you divert your attention or you distract yourself, and good for him being able to recognize that and address it.
And everyone goes through this differently. So we can't just say, you got to do it this way. But there are some principles. Like when he pays attention, he actually he focused in and he thinks about his spirit of his son, and he thinks about what his son did and his laughter and his reaching out to other children and other kids. So one of the things I want to talk about is Tiny Tim. Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol, right? We always hear about Scrooge and his little visitors. But who visited Tiny Tim to give him so much hope? Here's this little boy with a crutch, pretty bad life. His dad lives under the terror of Scrooge, yet this kid somehow put something together that wasn't just a holiday of grief. So as all of us have something out there to kind of, you know, be sad about at the holidays, and a lot of people just get overwhelmed by it, I'm going to suggest maybe there's 3 visitors. Okay, I'm just going to call them angels of Christmas past, present, and future. There are some things we could do, okay? So let's go through it. What are some keys to the angels of Christmas past? One of the rules I teach is celebrate the love lived, not the love lost, right? We celebrate the life of Tyson, not the loss of Tyson. I had a friend die when I was 21, 22 years old, close family friend, and when at the funeral, what do you say? What do you say? I'm sorry, my buddy died and your son died.
Right.
But they took all of his friends, they put us back in a room with a recorder, and for about 2 hours, we sat in the back room of a mortuary, and we just laughed and told story after story after story about how we loved Paul and we loved everything that he taught us. Well, we didn't think much about it. So then after the funeral, everything was done. Then a little while later, actually 20 years later, at my 40th anniversary, no, my 40th birthday, the brother comes up to me and he says, do you know that every birthday of Paul, we listen to that tape?
No.
And he says, it is the #1 healing thing that has changed our family about
special.
that.
How special.
But notice what we're looking at is his life.
You celebrated him. You laughed about, you know, times you had with him. You enjoyed and remembered those happy times.
That is one of the keys to this, is you're going to have the emotion. It's natural. But when you track the emotion back to the thought that's leading the emotion, the thought is usually about fear and loss. It's the loss that we end up suffering through with grief.
Can I ask where traditions fall in all of this? Because when we talk about honoring the past and remembering the past and even, you know, celebrating the life that we loved, traditions come into play, and a lot of times those traditions are so painful for people to continue.
I say continue them.
Really?
Because the power is in the tradition's a powerful way to keep the memory alive. We don't want to lose the memory so we don't feel the pain. Let's just change the tradition. Let's allow, so if Dad was the one that always told the Christmas story, let's let the son tell the Christmas story. And let's have this handover of the tradition. But don't get rid of the tradition. Research shows the rituals and the traditions are what keep us connected. Now, I know it's painful, and then you're going to go to the thoughts of the loss, and your brain will always take you to the thoughts of a loss to protect you so you don't lose again. It does not want you to lose again. But instead, when you notice the pain, instead try to turn it to a healthier thought. So another one is keep your traditions alive, but count your many blessings. One thing you might want to do as a family is sit down and think of the other 100 blessings from the year. Let's say you lost somebody, Grandma passed away this year in a very tragic way. What if we spent time as a family and identified 100 other blessings we've had this year? Or 100 blessings that Grandma taught us, and I would make those into ornaments. Somebody on your show needs to do this. And then we put all the memories and the great blessings on the tree, and we call it the blessing tree, and it's just another blessing. Make sense?
It's the family coming together to celebrate again a life that we loved.
By the way, that angel brings a different spirit than the feeling of the loss. Now, by the way, you'll look at the tree, you'll love it, you'll be benefiting by it, and then all of a sudden you'll flip and you'll start feeling guilt and grief again. When you feel the guilt and grief again, notice it's just the thought has switched, and we need to go back to try to find some more peace.
How can angels of the present help us?
Check the belief that moving on is loving less. Some people, after somebody has passed away, we believe that moving on doesn't mean we love anymore. So we don't want to move on. So instead of moving on, I want you to check the belief that moving on is loving less. Moving on is loving more. If you could sit down with the person that's passed away and ask them, what would you have me do? The first thing they would say to everyone is, you need to move on.
Yeah.
You need to keep going and take the great lessons like Steve was talking about that Tyson brought and keep those lessons alive and take the spirit of those lessons that Tyson lived and share them with the world.
Some people get that so well. You know, in the news industry, we often have to report on these tragedies, and it's amazing to see families and individuals who get that. They get that the person that is missing would want them to fill in the blank, continue on, live happily, celebrate, enjoy.
In fact, notice every one of those are directing the arrows outward instead of inward. One of the things that I think creates creates more and more grief, and the grief kind of keeps beating us up, is the fact that we become inwardly focused. And when you become inwardly focused, you're doing that to use the energy of grief to get it out of you. But you could turn the energy around and get it out of you just as quickly by taking the lessons taught to you by the person that died and sharing them with the world and giving them to the world.
Love that.
Arrows inward versus arrows outward.
Love that.
My favorite thing, though, is start counting the tender mercies. So around every catastrophe, there's always these beautiful little miracles. But we kind of don't, we remember them, but we don't account for them. But what I would suggest as a family is if you've just had a tragedy, or a tragedy years ago, start thinking about what are the tender mercies, the beautiful gifts from other people who said the right thing in the right moment, but the death of this opportunity created another opportunity or whatever. Find the tender mercies and start as a family or even as a person just writing them down and making sure you're accounting for the blessings. Count the blessings past and account for the tender mercies today, okay? Last but not least is future. If somebody's passed away, you eventually have to face the question of, well, what now?
Right.
And as long as you're not facing the what now question, you're not going to move on. The reality of all of us is you'll move on. You'll move on. Humans adapt. Humans change. It will work.
We have to.
You have to. But what we're afraid of is we can't or we won't. But I take anybody that's gone through a real traumatic experience, every one of them can move on. And an excellent example of it was Elizabeth Smart, who then wrote a book. And the writing of the book is the writing of the new story. So one of the activities I would suggest you do is just a simple Happy New Year activity, which next year, at next Christmas, a year after this event, what do we want to be said?
Almost a goal-setting activity, exercise?
Yep.
Yeah.
And what I just did this with a client who's a daughter that can't let go of the fact that her dad died 3 years ago. He was an awesome man, and her mom found someone new. She won't let go of it. So we were sitting there and she was in so much pain, and I said, so if your dad could come down with your God and your dad and they sat down together with you, what would he tell you about this new man? And she said he would tell me he's great. This guy's amazing. And what else would he tell you? He's probably happy that mom found him because she's protected now. Mom's being watched over by this new man.
It changed things.
It changed the whole story. And once you change the story, you can change the feeling and the mood. But don't be afraid of grief. Grief is a sign that you loved deeply.
And
grief
that's a
is a sign. That's a huge blessing.
That's a blessing.
But let's celebrate the love always, not the loss.
Love it, Matt. Thank you so much. You are offering such great advice on your website and some great stocking stuffers, I have to say. Conversations just like this that you've put on CD or disc. I can't think of a better gift to give.
20% off, too. All you got to do is go to matttownsend.com and enter in a password, a code, holiday, what is it? Holiday
2013.
And you get 20% off.
Thank you so much.
Brooklyn.
You've helped us,
Thank
my
you.
friend. All right, still ahead.